One of my first videos on this channel covered OLED SPI displays. It was a good start, but I have learned a ton since then. So today we are going deeper with both SPI and I²C versions to get the most out of those tiny displays. Let's dive in. At first glance, I²C and SPI displays appear nearly identical, often sharing the same dimensions and screen technology. The most obvious giveaway is the pin count. I²C typically requires only 4 pins, while SPI uses significantly more. However, the differences run much deeper than just physical wiring. Let's look at the I²C display first. To control it, we need a microcontroller. Let's choose the ESP32C3 Super Mini. The display, and for that matter any other I²C device, such as real-time clock module, is controlled through the I²C bus. What is I²C? I²C is a communication bus that uses two shared lines, a clock line, SCL, and a data line, SDA. These two lines are shared by all connected I²C devices. The microcontroller acts as a master, and the connected devices act as slaves. By default, on the ESP32C3 Super Mini, SCL is connected to GPIO pin 9 and SDA is connected to GPIO pin 8. What we are discussing here is not specific to this particular microcontroller. It applies to any microcontroller that supports I²C. For example, if we used an Arduino Nano, that would also work perfectly. The only requirement is to connect the two lines to the pins designated for I²C on that board. On the Arduino Nano, those pins are A5 for SCL and A4 for SDA. Now when the microcontroller, the master, starts the transmission, every I²C device on the bus electrically hears it. But how does the microcontroller know which device to talk to if multiple devices are connected? And how does the display know that the incoming data is meant for it? This works because every I²C device has its own unique address. These addresses are 7-bit long and are usually written in hexadecimal format. For example, a common address for an OLED display is 3C. The DS3232 real-time clock typically uses address 68. Here is what happens on the bus. The master sends a start condition. It then sends the 7-bit address plus a read-write bit. Every slave device compares the receive address with its own. If the address matches, the device responds with the acknowledgement bit. If the address does not match, the device ignores the rest of the transmission. No matching devices remain in the high impedance state, meaning they do not drive the data line and therefore do not interfere with communication. Now let's look how to connect SPI OLED display to the microcontroller. We'll stick to ESP32C3 Mini. The SPI bus consists of three main lines. First, the clock line, SEK, connected here to GPIO 4. Then we have MOSI, master out slave in, on GPIO 6, and MISO, master in slave out, on GPIO 5. When we are working with the OLED, we are only sending data to the display, so the MISO pin won't actually be used. However, it's essential if you are using bidirectional SPI device, like this SD card reader here. Those three pins are your standard hardware SPI pins. Every component on the bus connects to the shared clock, MOSI and MISO lines. Sometimes the labels on these cheap modules can be confusing, but once you identify which is which, the wiring is straightforward. Now, an OLED display isn't your typical SPI device. It has two additional pins you might not see elsewhere. First is the reset pin, used to initialize the display at the start of your sketch or any time in the code. It's active low, meaning it triggers when the signal drops. Then there is data command, DC pin, which tells the display whether the incoming transfer is raw pixel data or system command. Finally, let's look at the main way the microcontroller chooses who to talk to. Each module has a chip select pin. In this setup, the OLED connects to GPIO 8 and the SD card reader to GPIO 10. chip select pins are also active low, so if the microcontroller pulls the OLED's chip select line low and keeps the SD card reader's line high, the SD card reader ignores the bus, and the data transfer is targeted solely to the OLED display. Once the transfer is finished, the master pulls chip select high to end the session. To work with both types of displays, you will need these two libraries. In addition to the main display library, you will need the SPI library if you are using the SPI OLED, and if you are working with I²C display, you will need the wire library instead. The difference is not only in the wiring, but also in the way both displays are initialized in the code. Let's first take a look at SPI. Here are the pins you need to declare in the code. Out of these, only 3 pins are fixed: MOSI, MISO, and the clock pin. However, MISO is not necessary for OLED displays because we are only sending data to the display, not receiving anything from it. Keep it in mind that this standard pin assignment applies to boards like the Arduino Nano or Uno. If you are using a different board, such as ESP8266, you need to check the SPI pin assignment for that specific board. Boards like ESP32 even provide 2 separate sets of SPI pins, allowing you to use 2 independent SPI interfaces. In this particular case, the constructor for the OLED display would look like this. The SPI object indicates that we are using the default hardware SPI pins. However, we can override the default assignment and use any available GPIO pins by switching to software SPI. In this case, the constructor would look different, because we would need to explicitly specify which pins are used for MOSI and the clock. It's usually best to use hardware SPI whenever you can, because it's faster and uses the microcontroller's built-in SPI hardware. The initialization of the OLED display in the setup function would look like this. Also, don't forget the SPI library must be included in the code for this to work. Now let's take a look at I²C. With I²C, we don't have to declare pins in the code. Here are the standard I²C pins for Arduino and ESP8266. On Arduino, these pins are fixed and cannot be changed. On ESP boards, you can assign different pins, but this does not affect how the OLED display is initialized, so we won't cover that here. What you do need in the code is a line that tells the library there is no dedicated reset pin, and a line that defines I²C address of the OLED display. In this particular case, the constructor for the OLED display would look like this. The display initialization in the setup function would include the device address. Finally, make sure to include the wire library in your code, since this is required for using I²C. Once the display is properly declared and initialized, everything else is pretty much interface independent. The library manages the display buffer for you. That means whenever you draw text, lines, or shapes, those changes are not immediately visible on the screen. Instead, they are written to an internal buffer. Only when you call the display method are those buffer changes actually transferred to the screen. As for the available drawing methods, I already covered them in detail in my original OLED video. But let's quickly refresh our memory. I've been talking a bit too much, so let's switch to some ambient music and simply walk through all the methods we have at our disposal. There you go. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Let's take a quick moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. Whether you're moving from a rough circuit diagram or finished breadboard prototype, PCBWay is your go-to for custom manufacturing. Simply create your design, upload it to their site, and you will receive professionally packed high-quality PCBs delivered right to your door. Click the link above to take your projects to the next level with PCBWay. When you look at the wiring and the code, I²C definitely seems easier in both cases. So you might wonder, why would anyone choose the SPI OLED for their project? Well, there are a few good reasons. The first one is speed. Let's start with I²C. The standard speed for most of these displays is 100 kHz. In fast mode, they can run at 400 kHz. Some displays support 1 MHz, but that's less common. Now compare that to SPI. SPI displays typically run between 4 to 10 MHz. That makes them roughly 10 to 20 times faster than I²C in many real-world setups. With I²C you have one clock line and a single data line that handles both writing and reading. Everything goes over the same data line. SPI, on the other hand, has a clock line and separate data lines for transmitting and receiving. That separation alone makes a big difference in performance. But speed isn't just about clock frequency, it's also about overhead. With I²C, every transmission starts with a start condition from the microcontroller, then you send the device address. After that, the display sends back an acknowledgement bit, and also you have control bytes and a stop condition. And all of this happens over the same data line as the actual pixel data. SPI is much simpler. There are no device addresses, no acknowledgement bits. You just continuously stream data from the buffer created in your library straight to the display. So while SPI mainly focuses on pushing raw data, I²C spends a noticeable portion of its time managing and controlling the communication itself. And that's why, when it comes to refreshing display quickly, especially for animations or graphics, SPI often has the advantage. I was wondering how I could best present this difference. In one of the very first videos on this channel, I created an animation on an OLED display. Luckily, I still have that code, and it was written for the SPI version of the display. So let's load it up and see how it performs. 5 years later, it still looks pretty good. We are starting with a fairly long delay between frames and gradually decreasing it down to 50 milliseconds. That should give us roughly 20 frames per second. I made the necessary changes in the code to run it on the I²C display. Let's upload it. The animation starts. Do you see the difference? Honestly, I don't. This particular animation is 80 by 30 pixels. That works out to be just 300 bytes per frame. So let's raise the bar. Now we'll switch to the larger animation, 128 by 64 pixels. That means 1 kilobyte per frame. Here's the SPI version of the code. You can see the OLED display declaration at the top, followed by the large bitmap definitions for each frame. In the setup function, we initialize the display. I also added some tracking information to monitor performance. On screen you will see the delay between the frames defined in the code, the actual delay, which includes both the programming delay and the rendering time, and finally, calculated frames per second based on the real delay. We are starting at the 310 milliseconds delay per frame. We are running at 3 frames per second. Notice that the actual delay is slightly longer, because it takes roughly 8 additional milliseconds to render each frame. Now let's wait until the animation reaches a 50 millisecond delay. Under real conditions, that should give us 20 frames per second. But as you can see, we are actually getting around 17 frames per second. The slowdown comes from the time required to process and render each image. Let's compare this with I²C version. The declaration of the display is different, And in the setup function, we initialize the display by specifying its I²C address. Let's run it. Right away you can see it takes about 30 milliseconds just to render each frame. So with the same animation settings, how many frames per second can we achieve over I²C? Only about 12 frames per second. Let's put both animations side by side. The difference is quite clear. To reach around 16 frames per second on I²C, I would need to reduce the programmed delay to about 30 milliseconds, just to compensate for the slower transfer speed. So the speed difference is obvious. But does it actually matter for my projects? Honestly, I can't think of a single project I've built so far that truly requires SPI. For displaying text or drawing geometric shapes, the speed of the I²C display is more than sufficient. The only scenario where SPI might really matter is when driving multiple OLED displays and combining them into one larger display. In this case, bandwidth becomes much more important. The other reason I thought SPI displays would be inferior to I²C is the possibility of working with multiple displays in a single project. If we look back at the connection diagram, let's see what happens if we try to connect yet another I²C OLED display to the I²C bus. Since most OLED displays use a standard address, we would have two devices sharing the same address on the bus, which is not allowed. Does this mean there is no way to host two I²C OLED displays in a single project? Not exactly. You can find displays that have hardware option to change the address. If you look at the reverse side of such display, you will see a resistor soldered in one position with additional pads in a second position. By moving that resistor to the new position, you change the address to 3D. If we look at the SPI diagram, you can see that we can easily add another OLED display. We connect it to clock and MOSI lines of the bus, share the reset and DC connections with the first display, and then connect chip select pin to any other available digital pin. By declaring the second display in the code using this new chip select pin, we should in theory be able to work with two displays. That was a theory. I created a prototype, and to my disappointment, it seems that these cheap OLED displays do not properly handle the chip select signal. Specifically, they fail to release the MOSI and clock lines even when they aren't selected. I even tried to control the signal in the code myself with digital write commands, but no matter what I did, only one display would initialize. When I left both chip select pins floating, all of a sudden both displays initialized, but then you cannot control what is displayed on the particular screen. So while it initially looked like SPI would be better in this department, you often end up limited to just one display. You might manage two if you use more powerful microcontroller like ESP32, which has two independent hardware SPI interfaces. This would allow you to define one display per interface, though I haven't tested that setup yet. There are ways to control multiple OLEDs using multiplexers or buffers, but that's a topic for a separate video. For now, there is no clear winner in this category. So which OLED display should I use? If your code doesn't require frequent full-screen refreshes, or you're not planning to use multiple displays in your project, I²C is your best bet. It's just simpler. Now looking ahead, I am planning to build larger display by chaining 3 or 4 of these together using buffers. If I can get that working, you will be the first to know. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you liked the video, hit the like button, share the video. Huge thank you to all the people that support my channel through Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, or even by buying me a coffee. I will see you guys in my next video. Ciao!